movie review lovers friends. Today I am going to describe the movie story of Manedyer, C. Kumander. Now let's talk about it. As we know that Manedyer, C. Kumander is a 1987 Filipino action comedy film directed by Pablo Santiago, and starring Fernando Poe Jr. and his wife Susan Roces, the latter as the titular commander. Produced by FPJ Productions, the film was released on September 17, 1987. Critic Luciano E. Soriano of the Manila Standard gave Kumander a mildly positive review, commending Poe and Roces' delightful performances while deeming the film mildly amusing and an overextended TV sitcom. Plot. Icon. This article needs a plot summary. Please add one in your own words. November 2023. Learn how and when to remove this message. Cast. Fernando Poe Jr. as Jenner, a car dealer, 2. Susan Roces as Benita, a barangay chairperson and real estate agent, 2. Cheryl Cruz. Randy Santiago as Einstein, a scientist, 2. Paquito Diaz. Bon Dimayasiak. Chichi as Lola Baby, 2. Dencio Padilla as Dennis, 2. The Yanni Casimiro as Lolo Boy, 2. Tina Loy. Mili Tagasa as Honorata, Benita's friend, 2. Tatlong Pinoy. Vamba. Max Alvarado. Janice Gerardo. Joseph Sonora. Jeffrey Sonora. Lullaby. Becky Misa. Vic Varian. Luis Benedicto. Nonoy de Guzman. Belo Borja. Critical response. Luciano E. Soriano, writing for the Manila Standard, gave Kumander a mildly positive review, stating that the film was a mildly amusing situation comedy, with varying degrees of success in terms of comedic performances from the actors, though he considers Fernando Poe Jr. and Susan Roces delightful in their roles. Soriano also deems it to at least be superior to other local comedies for relying on its situations instead of facial expressions and toilet humor. The Manila Standard is a broadsheet newspaper in the Philippines which, as of 2017, is owned by the Romualdez family. The Romualdezes, through incumbent Representative Martin Romualdez, also own Journal Publications Incorporated, the owner of tabloid papers People's Journal and People's Tonight. Initially established as the Manila Standard in 1987, it merged with another newspaper, Today, on March 6, 2005, and became the Manila Standard Today, MST. In 2015, the newspaper renamed itself as The Standard, temporarily The New Standard, before reverting to its original name in 2016. Victor Agustin took over as chairman of the editorial board in 2008. Under his term, the company formally adopted an advocacy for the environment. In 2010, just as the Aquino administration took the reins of power, ownership of the Manila Standard Today changed hands again. This time, the Razon Group sold its interest to the Romualdez Group as Razon established Bloomberry Resorts and Hotels Corporation, owner of the Solaire Resort and Casino, 3. The newspaper once again was relaunched as The Standard, featuring a tallboy broadsheet format. The format is bigger than tabloids and smaller than newspapers, with pictures as the main inset of the front page. The new format was first implemented in the weekend issues before the full makeover happened in the weekday issues, since February 23, 2015. The Standard was named as the Newspaper of the Year during the 2015 Rotary Club of Manila Journalism Awards for its scoops on hot-button issues, like the Mamasapano incident and the Bangsamoro Basic Law Payola issues. 4. On July 25, 2016, the paper reverted to its broadsheet format, and it was renamed as the Manila Standard, the newspaper's original brand name in time for President Rodrigo Duterte's first State of the Nation address. Ferdinand Martin Gomez Romualdez, Sr., Tagalog pronunciation, Gomez Aranwales, born November 14, 1963, is a Filipino businessman, lawyer, and politician who served as the 28th Speaker of the House of Representatives from 2022 to 2025. He has also served as the representative for Ladies First District since 2019 and previously from 2007 to 2016. He was previously the House Majority Leader from 2019 to 2022. He is a first cousin of President Bongbong Marcos. Born to the fourth generation of the Romualdez family of Tacloban City, Leyte Province, he graduated from Cornell University in the United States and pursued legal studies at the University of the Philippines College of Law. Being admitted to the bar in 1993, Romualdez entered government in 2007 after being elected to the House of Representatives, being re-elected in 2010 and 2013. Upon being term limited as a representative in 2016, he sought a seat in the Senate and lost. Romualdez was elected back to the lower chamber in 2019. During his second tenure, he managed the successful vice presidential campaign of Sara Duterte. He was elected as Speaker in 2022. During his speakership, Romualdez played a key role in the Marcos Duterte rift and pursued constitutional reforms that were marred by irregularities. Romualdez attended Cornell University in the United States from 1981 to 1985, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Government, 3-4-7, in 1988. He earned a Certificate of Special Studies in Administration and Management from Harvard University. He later enrolled at the University of the Philippines College of Law in 1988, becoming a Upsilon Sigma Phi fraternity member. He earned his Bachelor of Laws degree in 1992, 3-4-8. He was admitted to the bar in 1993. In 1992, Romualdez was appointed as concurrent trustee and president of the Dona Remedios Trinidad Romualdez Medical Foundation and Dr. Vicente Orestes Romualdez Educational Foundation, both of which are owned by his family. In the 2019 elections, Romualdez again won as representative of Leyte's 1st District. Romualdez was later elected as Majority Floor Leader of the House of Representatives of the Philippines for the 18th Congress. He was re-elected in 2022 and in 2025. In December 2021, Romualdez became the campaign manager of Sara Duterte's vice presidential campaign alongside Davao Occidental Governor Claude Bautista. Romualdez was as Speaker of the House of Representatives elected in July 2022, receiving the votes of the 284 House members, 22, during his speakership. Romualdez also assumed legislative caretaker roles for the majority of the vacated districts during the 19th Congress, such as Cavite, 7th, later filled by Crispin Diego Romulla, 23, Negros Oriental, 3RD, Batangas, 6th, Palawan, 3RD, Palawan, 1SD, Cavite, 4th, and Negros Occidental, 3RD. In November 2022, Romualdez, along with 6 other lawmakers, filed House Bill No. 6398 proposing the creation of the Maharlika Investment Fund, a sovereign wealth fund for the Philippines inspired by South Korea's Korea Investment Corporation. 26-27. The proposal drew mixed reactions from economists and mostly negative reactions from the general public. Under Romualdez's watch, the House denied Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte's requests for confidential funds that could be used for the Education Department's proposed Reserve Officers Training Corps program, 36, but swiftly passed the same funds for the Office of the President wink with a frown, 37. This led Sara's father and former President Rodrigo Duterte to allege a connivance between Romualdez and the leftist Macabayan bloc in stripping Sara of confidential funds, 36. Rodrigo Duterte criticized the House as the most rotten institution in the country, 38, and demanded an audit of the House under Romualdez wink with a frown, 39. Duterte's comments offended some House members, 40, including Romualdez, 41, prompting the House to issue a loyalty check resolution in support of Romualdez. Shortly after, the House expelled Duterte's political allies, former President and Representatives Gloria Macapagal Arroyo and Isidro Ungab, as Deputy House Speakers for failing to sign the resolution, 42. Several House members of Duterte's party, PDP, Laban, later party switched, mostly to the Romualdez-led Lakas CMD, 43, in late November 2023. Reports circulated that some House members want Vice President Sara impeached, 44. The House later began tackling at least 3 House resolutions filed separately by the Macabayan bloc, House Human Rights Panel Chairperson Bienvenido Abante Jr., and one writer Party List Representative Ramon Rodrigo Gutierrez, and Albay 1st District Representative Edsel Lagman, 45. Urging the Marcos administration to cooperate with the International Criminal Court's investigation into Duterte's war on drugs, Romualdez denied prioritizing the measures, 46. A month later, the National Telecommunications Commission imposed a 30-day suspension on SMNI, a media network which hosted Rodrigo Duterte's platform Gikan Sa Masa, Para Sa Masa, after the House adopted a resolution filed by PBA Party List Representative Margarita Nograles, who claimed that the network was propagating false information. 47. Two hosts of another SMNI talk show, Laban Kasama Ong Bayan, were detained and cited in contempt by the House after one of its hosts, Jeffrey Celise, refused to reveal his source for his claim that Romualdez had 1.8 billion Cuban pesos worth of travel funds. 48. Amid the feud between the Marcos and Duterte clans in late April 2023, Romualdez said the House will probe into an agreement Duterte made during his presidency with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Under the agreement, Duterte agreed to maintain the status quo in the South China Sea to avoid escalating a war. Political analyst Ronald Lamas said the probe was engineered by President Bongbong Marcos as a political payback to Duterte's verbal attacks and to reduce Duterte's political influence ahead of the 2025 midterm elections. 49. Charter change attempts. Main article: 2024 constitutional reform attempts in the Philippines. Efforts to amend the Constitution intensified in January 2024 after pro-charter change group, People's Initiative for Reform, Modernization and Action, PIRMA, admitted talking with Romualdez and claimed responsibility for a signature drive campaign that attempted to start a People's Initiative. 50. The proponents proposed that both chambers of the Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, vote jointly on the proposed amendments in a constitutional assembly. Consequentially, the 24-member Senate unanimously rejected the proposal since its vote would be overpowered by the 316-member House. 51. The signature drive has been marred by allegations of vote buying. 52. And by the evening of January 23, the proponents claimed to have achieved the required minimum 12% of national voters threshold. 53. Romualdez denied spearheading the initiative, although a video evidence showing the opposite was later disclosed by Senator Francis Escudero. 54. As of December 2023, Romualdez is the president of the Philippine Constitution Association. 55. Controversy over flood control projects and resignation. Months leading up to the height of the flood control project's controversy in the Philippines in September 2025, media speculation arose regarding a possible leadership change in the lower house, especially after Sara Diskaya implicated Romualdez in the alleged anomalies. 56. By September 6, Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin rebuked Congress under Romualdez's speakership, urging the speaker to clean up your house first. 57. Romualdez, along with his ally and former Appropriations Chair Zaldi Co., has drawn criticism over alleged involvement in the 2025 General Appropriations Act, which opponents denounce as one of the most flawed and corrupt spending measures ever approved. 58. On September 17, Romualdez formally resigned as Speaker, a move Deputy Speaker Jay Conghun described as one that aimed to allow Romualdez to better clarify his role in the allegations made against him. Leading up to Romualdez's resignation, media outlets reported that Boji Dai was a leading candidate to replace the former as Speaker. 59. Dai was eventually elected as House Speaker on the same day, garnering 253 votes. Romualdez married Yetta Marie Kittelstvedt, who represented the Philippines at Miss International 1996, in civil rights in Hong Kong in November 1999. With a church wedding following at Santuario de San Antonio in Forbes Park, Makati, on February 4, 2001. 62. They have 4 children and currently live in Tacloban and Makati. Their sons Ferdinand Martin Romualdez Jr., also known as Marty, and Andrew Julian Romualdez are also in politics, having been elected as a councillor of Tacloban and a representative of Tinged Party list in 2025, respectively. Since 2024, a series of allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and irregularities in government-funded flood management projects have been occurring in the Philippines under the administration of President Bongbong Marcos. The controversy centers on billions of pesos allocated for flood management initiatives, reports of ghost projects, substandard construction, and the alleged cornering of contracts by a small group of favored contractors. In response, a series of protests against alleged corruption began. Senators Ping Lacson and Sherwin Gatchalian and Congress Representatives Rene Coe, Sara Alego, Antonio Tinio, and Chil Diokno questioned the inclusion of unprogrammed funds in the national budget. Unprogrammed appropriations, according to them, have been the source of corruption-laden government projects. The proposed 2026 national budget includes 249 billion Cuban pesos, $5.06 billion in unprogrammed funds, which the lawmakers say will ensure the continuation of corruption in government. In 2023 and 2024, Marcos freed up unprogrammed funds worth 214 billion Cuban pesos, $4.35 billion for priority infrastructure projects under Deep WH, half of which, Cuban peso 111 billion, $2.25 billion, went to flood control projects. 6. Ghost projects. Frowny face. DPWH officials acknowledged possible ghost projects in Bulacan, particularly in Calumpit, Hagonoy, and Malolos, where Wawa builders reportedly bagged 9 billion Cuban pesos, $182.74 million worth of contracts. According to Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Ramola, a lawyer provided insight into a 5 billion Cuban pesos, $101.52 million, ghost project in central Luzon, suggesting that the contractor could receive up to 40% of the project. 9. License renting schemes. Reports emerged that contractor licenses rated AAA or quadruple A were being leased to smaller builders, a practice linked to substandard construction output. 10. Contractor monopolies. Senators alleged that a small group of contractors had cornered contracts worth around 100 billion Cuban pesos, $2.03 billion, raising concerns over competition and transparency. Marcos revealed that only 15 out of 2,409 of the accredited contractors were awarded 100 billion Cuban pesos, or 18% of the entire 545.6 billion Cuban pesos. $11.08 billion flood mitigation budget allocated by his administration from July 2022 to May 2025. 11-12. Misallocation and quality issues. Senator J.V. Ejercito criticized the lack of alignment between project funding and actual flood-prone areas, asking for proof of a comprehensive master plan. 13. Senator Erwin Tulfo, the vice chairperson of the Blue Ribbon Committee, described the 545.6 billion Cuban pesos, $11.08 billion flood control program as a grand robbery, claiming that kickbacks and commissions as high as 25% left only 30 to 40% of funds for actual construction. 14. Senator Amy Marcos, the president's sister, called attention to stalled flagship projects, such as the Paranaque Spillway and Laguna de Bay dredging, which were expected to alleviate flooding in Metro Manila but suffered from delays. 15. Senator Bam Aquino raised concerns that the flood control budget exceeded allocations for school infrastructure, suggesting a misprioritization of public funds. In Oriental Mindoro, a dispute arose between Governor Humerlito Dolor and the provincial board over his dredging-based flood control program, which the latter questioned for its legality and transparency. The provincial board called for investigations, while Dolor defended the initiative as cost-free and compliant with environmental laws. He also criticized the provincial board for ignoring failed DWH flood control projects in the province. 20. Flood control project collapse in Lucena. In August 2025, a 100 million Cuban pesos, $2.03 million flood control project in Lucena, Quezon, under the office of Representative David Suarez, Quezon, 2ND collapsed, raising significant public concern. The project, built along the Dumaco River near the city proper, drew criticism after a video circulated showing part of the structure falling apart. Observers noted it appeared to have been constructed with a mix of sand and cement and featured minimal steel reinforcement. Critics have cited this as a clear indicator of poor construction practices and possible misuse of infrastructure funds. As of the latest reports, neither Suarez nor the Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, has issued an official explanation regarding the collapse or project details. Residents have called for investigations from the Commission on Audit, COA, and relevant agencies to ensure accountability. The incident renewed. Construction companies owned by married couple Curly and Sarah Disquea, also known as Cesara Rowena Cruz, St. Timothy Construction Corporation, and Alpha and Omega General Contractor and Development Corporation, were involved in government flood control contracts in Bulacan and Iloilo City. In August 2025, President Marcos criticized a flood mitigation structure in Bulacan, calling it a ghost project, due to its visibly unfinished and structurally deficient state. Despite its 96.49 million Cuban pesos, $1.96 million budget, 23 local officials in Iloilo City similarly reported that Disquea-linked projects were delayed or failed to function as intended. 24. Separately, the couple drew public scrutiny after media features revealed their ownership of around 40 luxury vehicles, including a Cadillac Escalade, Bentley Bentayga, Porsche Cayenne, Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and Mercedes-Maybach GLS, with an estimated total value of 300 million Cuban pesos, $6.09 million to 465 million Cuban pesos, $9.44 million 2526. In response, the Bureau of Customs, BC, launched an investigation into whether the vehicles were properly declared, taxed, and legally imported. BC Commissioner Ariel Nepomuceno noted that seizure or additional tax liabilities could result if the probe reveals deficiencies. Access to vehicles stored in residential property, however, remains contingent on obtaining a court-issued warrant or letter of authority. 27-28, civil society, including youth groups and political leaders, criticized the conspicuous display of wealth amid allegations that Disquea-linked companies benefited from flood control contracts, some of which are under Senate scrutiny. Pasig Mayor Vico Sotto, who had defeated Disquea in the 2025 Pasig mayoral election, described the spectacle as bad regardless of the source, and called for accountability. 29. In September 2025, it was revealed that Senator Bongo's family was a business partner of the Disqueas for years, partnering with CLDG Builders, owned by his father, Desiderio, for over 816.98 million Cuban pesos, $16.59 million in infrastructure projects in the Davao region in 2017. The two construction companies had partnered to secure 5 infrastructure projects in Davao, owned by Sarah's husband, Curly Disquea. Desiderio Go signed contracts with DPWH as the authorized managing officer and represented the two companies. According to the DPWH database, it was shown that 5 joint projects for road construction have already been completed. 30. On September 1, 2025, Sarah Disquea attended a Senate Blue Ribbon Committee hearing and revealed that her 9 construction firms have sometimes been involved in bidding for the same government flood control projects simultaneously. Initially, Disquea denied the allegation, but Senate President pro tempore and committee vice chairperson Jinggoy Estrada pressed for data from the DPWH, in which Disquea admitted to. This was the first time Disquea attended the Senate probe after being subpoenaed for skipping the August 19 hearing. 31, 2 out of 15 contractors, who received 20% of the country's flood control budget worth 100 billion Cuban pesos, $2.03 billion over the past 3 years, denied involvement in ghost projects being investigated by the government. All 15 were present, except Alpha and Omega General Contractor and Development Corporation and NG Samid and Construction. Blue Ribbon Committee Chairperson Rodante Marcolita, Jingoy Estrada, and Vice Chairperson Erwin Tulfo questioned Disquea about her ownership of Alpha and Omega and 8 other companies she claims are co-owned by her. Senate Minority Leader Tito Sato inquired about the commencement of flood control projects by Disquea's companies from the DPWH. Disquea admitted that she began working with the DPWH in 2012, focusing on major projects from 2016 onwards, primarily in the provinces. 32. On September 20, 2025, a flood control project was halted after the revocation of the company's license. Phase 1 of the project in Lacaste Village, Barangay Pasaninca, Zamboanga City is completed, while Phase 2 is 72% complete and Phase 3 is 57% complete. Phase 2, valued at 95 million Cuban pesos, $1.93 million, was set for May 26 to June 26, 2026, and Phase 3, worth 1.43 billion Cuban pesos, $29.04 million, was scheduled from January 14 to December 2026. 33. Banaon Mayor Jel Alante, center, with his wife Jocelyn Menego Alante, left, and daughter Jella Alante, right. Angela Jella Alante, an actress and daughter of Banaon Mayor Angelo Jel Alante, 37, attracted social media criticism in August 2025 after a resurfaced video showed her commenting on political dynasties, specifically, Pano Ba Yen? Nasa political dynasty Yan Pamilia Ko. I mean, controversial, translate, what can I do? My family is in a political dynasty. I mean, controversial, delivered with laughter. 38. The backlash intensified because the clip circulated shortly after typhoons Krising and Dante, when Banaon was experiencing flood-related hardships. Critics described her demeanor as insensitive to the local community's suffering, especially as the calamity coincided with her social media posts on her birthday celebration in July 2025. 39-40. Although she was not directly implicated in flood control contract controversies, the timing and tone of the video, coupled with her family's political prominence, led to broader discussions about privilege, political dynasties, and the role of public figures during national infrastructure crises. 40. Jamie Cruz. Jamie Cruz, daughter of Noel Cruz, owner of STO Cristo Construction and Trading Incorporated, headquartered in Limay, Bataan, attracted public attention in 2025 after a video surfaced showing her displaying a luxury Chanel bag. 4140. Her family company secured at least 3.5 billion Cuban pesos, $71.07 million, worth of flood control projects from 2022 to 2024. The video sparked public criticism, with social media users linking the displayed luxury items to her family's involvement in flood control contracts. In response, Jamie deactivated her YouTube channel and set her Instagram account to private. 41-34. Duterte family involvement. The Duterte family, a political dynasty based in Davao City, has figured prominently in public discussion regarding the allocation and use of flood control funds in the Philippines. Members of the family have held high-ranking political offices, including former President Rodrigo Duterte, Vice President Sara Duterte, acting Davao City Mayor Sebastian Duterte, and Representative Paulo Duterte, Davao City. 1SD. While observers and critics have raised questions about the relationship between their political roles and government infrastructure spending, Rodrigo Duterte's daughter, Veronica Kitty Duterte, is not involved in politics, but has attracted media attention as a social media personality. Reports have noted her purchases of luxury items and high-end goods, which have been highlighted in discussions of political families and public perceptions of wealth. While she has no direct role in flood control allocations, her lifestyle has occasionally been cited in commentary about the Duterte family's public image. 35. Between 2022 and 2024, Congress appropriated billions of pesos for nationwide flood control projects through the Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH. Budget records show that the Davao region, particularly Davao City's 1st District represented by Paulo Duterte, received some of the largest allocations, with reports indicating roughly 51 billion Cuban pesos, $1.04 billion US, earmarked for projects over a 3-year period. 42. The large appropriations drew attention amid broader controversy surrounding the National Flood Control Program in 2024 to 2025, which was marked by allegations of ghost projects, overpricing, and irregularities involving contractors and implementing agencies. 42. Mayor Sebastián Duterte publicly dismissed criticisms of flood control allocations as a publicity stunt, a remark that was met with pushback from lawmakers and civil society groups who argued the matter warranted closer scrutiny. 43. Despite a Kamalik ban on giving or receiving donations from contractors, Glenn Iskander gave Sara Duterte a donation for her campaign. Iskander's Istefco Realty Corporation paid for advertisements worth 19.9 million Cuban pesos, $404,060 US and 91 cents, for Sara Duterte's 2022 campaign for vice president. Genesis 88 Construction Incorporated, also owned by Iskander, was a major contractor for the Deep WH during Rodrigo Duterte's presidency. 44. Constitutional Commission investigation. Commission on Audit. Estimated prices of the flood control projects per town and city. Major cities in the Philippines receive much more budget in flood control projects. In July 2025, Commission on Audit, COA, Chairperson Gamaliel Cordoba ordered a fraud audit of flood control projects in Bulacan, following citizen complaints filed through the Sumbon SA Pangulo. Translation report to the President, platform. Bulacan alone accounted for nearly 45% of Central Luzon's 548 billion Cuban pesos, $11.13 billion US, flood control budget since 2022, making it a focal point of investigation. 45. In September 2025, the COA initiated a performance audit on government flood control projects in the Philippines, following a directive from President Marcos. The decision follows widespread flooding and devastation in Metro Manila, raising concerns about the effectiveness of current flood mitigation programs. In a memorandum on August 23, 2025, Cordoba instructed the COA Performance Audit Office, PO, to commence the audit immediately. The directive aligns with COA Resolution Number 2024-018, which approved the Performance Audit Portfolio (PP) for 2024 to 2026, which includes programs like the government's Flood Risk Management and Resiliency Program for Performance Audits. 46. On September 18, 2025, COA identified 4 flood control projects in Bulacan, collectively valued at 389.6 million Cuban pesos, $7.91 million US, and submitted fraud audit reports concerning them to the Office of the Ombudsman. 47. On September 26, 2025, COA reported that officials and contractors from the Deep WH in Bulacan could face graft and malversation charges over 360 million Cuban pesos, $7.31 million US, in flood control projects. According to fraud audit reports submitted by COA to the ICI, several flood control projects in Bulacan have been identified. It includes the construction of a flood control structure along the Angat River at Barangay Santo Cristo/Barangay Tal for 92.9 million Cuban pesos, $1.89 million US, by Sims Construction Trading. A riverbank protection structure, Package A, at Barangay Bulacan for 69 million Cuban pesos, $1.4 million US, by Top Notch Catalyst Builders Incorporated, and 2 similar projects involving slope protection and waterways along Boco River in Barangay Bambang and Barangay Turo, each costing 99 million Cuban pesos, $2.01 million US, and executed by a joint venture between Top Notch Catalyst Builders Incorporated and Beam Team Developer Specialist Incorporated. COA indicated that individuals involved may be charged with graft and corruption, malversation, and falsification of documents under the revised Penal Code, along with violations of COA Circular Number 2009-001 and the Government Procurement Reform Act. 48. Commission on Elections. Further information, Elections in the Philippines section campaign finance and vote buying. Lack of regulation in campaign donations and weak public procurement system have left public funds vulnerable to corruption. In 2022, at least 30 contractors who gave campaign donations to senators and representatives had or were given government projects. 49. In the 2022 Philippine presidential election, candidates Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte got tens of millions of pesos from contractors, despite the omnibus election code banning donations from companies that do business with the government. From 2022 to 2025, the public works contracts of those campaign donors rose significantly, 44. On August 28, 2025, the Commission on Elections, COMELEC, identified at least 15 government contractors who contributed to candidates in the 2022 national and local elections, raising concerns about potential campaign finance laws that could lead to jail terms for those involved. According to COMELEC chairperson George Garcia, the contractors were identified by the poll body's Political Finance and Affairs Department, and the list may expand as the review continues. The contractors are considered as such if they had a government contract at the time the candidate filed their candidacy or after the elections. 50-51. On September 8, 2025, Francis Escudero was ousted as Senate President following reports that his top donor in the 2022 Senate election was the president of Centerways Construction, which has been linked to allegedly anomalous flood control projects. The most populous city in the Philippines. According to the 2024 census, it has a population of 3,084,270 people. 15. It was founded on October 12, 1939, and was named after Manuel L. Quezon, the second president of the Philippines. Quezon City served as the capital of the Philippines from 1948 until 1976, when the designation was returned to Manila. The city was intended to be the national capital of the Philippines that would replace Manila, as the latter was suffering from overcrowding, lack of housing, poor sanitation, and traffic congestion. To create Quezon City, several barrios were carved out from the towns of Caloocan, Marikina, San Juan, and Pasig, in addition to the 8 vast estates the Philippine government purchased for this purpose. It was officially proclaimed the national capital on October 12, 1949, and several government departments and institutions moved out of Manila and settled into the new capital city. This necessitated the expansion of the city northward, carving out Novaliches from Caloocan, which divided it into 2 non-contiguous parts. Several barrios were also taken from San Mateo and parts of Montalban. However, on June 24, 1976, Presidential Decree No. 940 was enacted, which reverted national capital status to Manila while the whole of Metro Manila was designated as the seat of government. 16. 17. The city was also chosen as the regional center of Southern Tagalog, which was created in 1965, along with the provinces of Quezon and Aurora, the birthplace of Manuel L. Quezon. However, its status of regional center became ineffective when the region was divided into Calabarzon and Mimaropa. Through the effect of Executive Order No. 103 in May 2002 under the presidency of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and Aurora was transferred to the authority of Central Luzon, with Southern Tagalog limited to being a cultural geographic region. 18. Quezon City is known for its culture, entertainment industry and media, and is aptly called the City of Stars. Major broadcasting networks have their headquarters and studios in the city. It is also known for its commerce, education, research, technology, politics, tourism, art, and sports. Several national government branches, including the Batasang Pambansa Complex, the seat of House of Representatives of the Philippines, call the city home. Quezon City is a planned city. It covers a total area of 161.11 square kilometers, 62.20 square miles, 5, making it the largest city in Metro Manila/NCR in terms of land area. It is politically subdivided into 6 congressional districts, which represent the city in the lower house of the Congress of the Philippines. The city has 142 barangays under the city government. National government departments and agencies are mostly situated in the First National Government Center, NGC, in Diliman, and the second National Government Center in Batasan Hills, where the lower house of the Philippine Congress is located. Most of the city's northern part lies at the foothills of the Sierra Madre mountain range, including the La Mesa Watershed Reservation, the largest watershed in Metro Manila and a designated protected area. According to its 2023 estimated census, Quezon City had 3.1 million people in its boundaries and 1.27 trillion Cuban pesos, $93.8 billion US dollars, citation needed, in its gross domestic product, GDP, and it is the only planned city in the National Capital Region of the Philippines. History. Commonwealth era. Initial plans for a new capital city. Manuel L. Quezon, the second president of the Philippines and the visionary behind the creation of Quezon City, is the namesake of the city. Before the creation of Quezon City, the land on where it would eventually rise was part of several towns such as Caloocan, Marikina, Marikina, Montalban, renamed as Rodriguez, Pasig, San Mateo, and San Juan del Monte, renamed as San Juan, all under Manila Province and, beginning in 1901, Rizal Province. In the 1930s, Manila's urban problems were apparent and problematic. 19. It lacked public housing, where thousands of the city's residents lived in congested informal settler communities, especially in the central districts of Binondo, Intramuros, Quiapo, San Nicolas and Tonda. 19. There were also problems with sanitation and traffic congestion. 19. The rise of slums in Manila gave rise to the development of its suburbs outside the city limits in the municipalities of Pasay, San Felipe Neri, renamed as Mandaluyong, San Francisco del Monte, Makati, and San Juan del Monte. 19. These towns became favorable to the upper and middle class who wanted to escape the congested city, but had economic links to it. 19. President Manuel L. Quezon, aware of the problems besetting Manila, initiated housing projects called Barrio Obrero, Workers' Community. 19. These communities were established in various places in Manila such as Avenida Rizal, Sta Cruz and Barrio Vitas Tonda. 19. However, the project failed miserably and these communities became slum areas. 19. Alejandro Roces Sr., a prominent Filipino author, was said to be influential in Quezon's vision to establish a new city. 19. Quezon dreamed of a city where the common people could live and thrive. 19. Roces suggested that a sizable tract of land be purchased for this purpose. 19. However, the government had no available fund except for 3 million Cuban pesos in the hands of the National Development Company, NDC. 19. Tomas Morato, the first mayor of Quezon City. In order to make Quezon's dream a reality and to mobilize funds for the land purchase, the People's Homesite Corporation, PHC, was created on October 14, 1938, as a subsidiary of NDC. With an initial capital of 2 Cuban pesos million. 19. Roces was the chairman of the board of PHC, and they immediately acquired the vast Diliman estate of the Tuason family at a cost of 5 centavos per square meter. 19. PHC conducted topographical and subdivision surveys, and then subdivided the lots and sold them to the target buyers at an affordable price. 19. Its target users and beneficiaries were Manila's working class. 20. Who were suffering from a shortage of affordable and decent housing in the capital. 19. The service of the Metropolitan Waterworks System was extended to site. 19. The Bureau of Public Works, then under Secretary Vicente Fraganti, constructed the streets and highways within the property. 19. Quezon also tapped architect Juan Arellano to draft a design of the city. 19. 8 vast estates were acquired in order to create Quezon City. Diliman Estate, 1,573.22 hectares, 15.7322 square kilometers. Santa Mesa Estate, 861.79 hectares, 8.6179 square kilometers. Mandaluyong Estate, 781.36 hectares, 7.8136 square kilometers. Magdalena Estate, 764.48 hectares, 7.6448 square kilometers. Piedad Estate, 743.84 hectares, 7.4384 square kilometers, May Silo Estate, 266.73 hectares, 2.6673 square kilometers, and the San Francisco Del Monte Estate, 257.54 hectares, 2.5754 square kilometers. 19. Quezon's goal was to create a place for the working class, coinciding with the planned transfer of the University of the Philippines campus in Manila to a more suitable location, which became another precedent for the creation of Quezon City. 19. As early as 1928, the University of the Philippines, UP, had planned to expand by adding more academic units and constructing new buildings. 19. The university experienced increase in enrollment and its planned expansion was hampered by its small campus in Manila. 21. The revised Burnham Plan of Manila envisioned the new campus to be located just outside Manila's city limits at the heights behind Manila. 19. The UP Board of Regents informed Quezon of their desire to relocate the campus and he was supportive of the idea. 19. Furthermore, he wanted the facilities in the Manila campus to be used for government purposes. 19. In 1939, Quezon urged the National Assembly to enact UP's relocation, and on June 8, 1939, Commonwealth Act No. 442 was passed, enacting the transfer of UP outside of Manila. 22. A portion of Marikina Estate, which was adjacent to Magdalena Estate, was chosen as the new site with an approximate area of 600 hectares, 1,500 acres. 19. Additional land from the Diliman Estate was also added as part of the new university campus. 19. Creation of Quezon City. Quezon Memorial Circle is the focal point of the newly established capital city, site of the proposed National Capitol Building. With the development of the People's Homesite Corporation housing in the Diliman Estate and the creation of the new UP campus, the creation of Quezon City was justified. 19. On October 12, 1939, Commonwealth Act No. 502, also known as the Charter of Quezon City, was passed by the National Assembly, which created Quezon City. 23. Surprisingly, Quezon allowed the bill to lapse into law because he did not sign it. 19. The city was originally to be known as Balintawak City, according to the first bill filed by Assemblyman Ramon P. Mitra Sr. from Mountain Province, but Assemblyman Narciso Ramos and Eugenio Perez, both from Pangasinan, amended and successfully lobbied the Assembly to name the city after the President in honor of his role in the creation of this new city. 24, 25, 19. The creation of Quezon City halted the full implementation of the Burnham Plan of Manila, and funds were diverted for the establishment of the new capital. Several barangays from different towns were carved out to correspond to the estates that PHC bought for the creation of Quezon City. 19. The new city had an area of 7,355 hectares, 73.55 square kilometers, and the barrios and sitios that were taken for its creation were the following: Bagubante, Bago Bante, Balangasa, Balintawak, Balintawak, Kaingan, Kongkong, Loma, La Loma, Malamig, Matalahib, Masambong, San Isidro, San Jose, Santal, and Tatalan were taken from Caloocan-Winkwithafrown 26, Cubao, Diliman, Camuning. New Manila and San Francisco del Monte were taken from San Juan, Balera, Barranca, Jesus de la Pena, Krasnaligas, Tanong, and the site of the new UP campus were taken from Marikina, and the barrios and sitios of Libis and Ogan, Yugo Norte, from Pasig. 19. Commonwealth Act No. 659, enacted on June 21, 1941, changed the city's boundaries. 27. Under this law, the area of Wak Wak Golf and Country Club were to be reverted to Mandaluyong, and the barrios of Lower Barranca and Jesus de la Pena were reverted to Marikina. However, Camp Crame was taken out of San Juan and was given to Quezon City. 1927. 1939, the year the city was established, recorded a population of 39,103 people. The city in its early days was predominantly rural, but Quezon asked American architect William Parsons to craft a master plan for the newly created city. 19. Parsons was the one who advised Quezon to locate the National Government Center in Diliman instead of Wallace Field, now Rizal Park, due to the possibility of naval bombardment from Manila Bay. 19. He died in December 1939 and his partner Harry T. Frost took over and became the lead planner. 19. Frost arrived in the Philippines on May 1, 1940 and became the architectural advisor of the Philippine Commonwealth Government. 19. Together with Juan M. Arellano, Alpheus D. Williams, and Welton Beckett, they created the master plan for Quezon City, which was approved by the Philippine government in 1941. 19. The Frost Plan featured wide avenues, large open spaces, and roundabouts at major intersections. 19. The plan for major thoroughfares made by Lewis Croft for the Greater Manila area served as the backbone for the plan of Quezon City. 19. The center of the city was a 400-hectare, 990-acre quadrangle formed by 4 avenues north, west, south, and east, which was designed to be the location of the national government of the Philippines. 28. At the northeast corner of the quadrangle was a large roundabout, a 25-hectare, 62-acre elliptical site, where the proposed Capitol building is envisioned to rise. 19. To make the city accessible, Quezon ordered Luzon bus lines to ply from Camining towards Tutuban in Divisoria, Manila to provide transport for the city's residents. However, the fare was not affordable to minimum wage earners. Because of the city's unaffordable housing prices and lack of transportation for low-income earners, the goal of creating mass housing for the working class was not met. Instead, those who opted to live in Quezon City consisted of middle-class households such as those in Camining, whose residents petitioned to rename it from Barrio Obrero, Workers' Community, to Camining, a type of tree that grows abundantly in the area, because its residents were not obreros, workers. 19. Japanese occupation. Map of the city of Greater Manila in 1942, showing Quezon City divided into 2 districts, Balintawak and Diliman, during its incorporation. The Philippine Exposition in 1941 was held on the newly established Quezon City, but participants were limited to locals because of the increasing turbulence at the beginning of the Second World War. 19. Eventually, parts of Manila were bombed by the Japanese Imperial Forces in December 1941, bringing the war to the Philippines. On January 1, 1942, President Quezon issued Executive Order No. 400 as an emergency measure to form the city of Greater Manila, with Jorge B. Vargas as its designated mayor. It merged the city with Manila and the towns of Caloocan, Makati, Mandaluyong, Parañaque, Pasay, and San Juan. The mayors of these towns and cities served as the assistant mayor of their respective localities and were under the mayor of Greater Manila. 29, 30. The city of Greater Manila was the basis for the formation of Metro Manila in 1975. After Imperial Japanese forces conquered the Philippines during the Pacific War, the city of Greater Manila was reorganized in 1942 into 12 districts, 2 of which were formed by dividing Quezon City. The Balintawak, which consisted of San Francisco del Monte, Galas, La Loma, New Manila, Santa Mesa State, the Wack Wack Golf and Country Club, and the present-day Green Hills, San Juan, and Diliman, which was composed of Diliman proper, Cubao, the University District, and the present-day eastern portion of Marikina. 31. In the same year, the patients of Quezon Institute were relocated to the San Juan de Dios Hospital in Intramuros, and the Japanese military used the facility for its own sick and wounded. And they also used St. Joseph's College as a hospital. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Service's 29th Squadron, equipped with Ki-44 and Ki-84 fighter planes, was assigned to Zablon Field of Camp Murphy. This colonial airfield was modernized by the Japanese with the construction of longer concrete runways, which now form the southernmost part of Katipunan Avenue and White Plains Avenue. The Japanese also renamed some streets, most notably South Avenue, which became Timog Avenue. On the morning of September 21, 1944, Zablon Field and 3 other Japanese airfields in Greater Manila were attacked by American carrier aircraft, which caused President Laurel to issue declarations of martial law and of war. In January 1945, When the Americans returned to mainland Luzon, they gave numerical designations to some roads such as Route 54, which is now Epifanio de los Santos Avenue. In February, the American cavalry and Filipino guerrilla units advanced into Quezon City, defeating Imperial Japanese forces. Heavy fighting occurred in Novaliches, which at that time was within Caloocan, and New Manila, which had been fortified. Smaller actions were fought at Barrio Talapapa and the University District, and the destruction of the bridge on the Tullahan River delayed the advance of the Americans along Route 52, now known as Carina Highway. After the Battle of Manila, the city of Greater Manila was dissolved by President Sergio Osmeña, thus separating the cities and towns that were consolidated and regaining their pre-war status. 32. The area which formed the city was then governed by the Philippine Executive Commission. Students from these Quezon City schools, representing a spectrum of positions, were thus at the front lines of the major protests of the first 3 months of 1970, what would later be called the First Quarter Storm. A year later in 1971, this was followed up by the Diliman Commune, in which the students, faculty, and residents of Up Diliman initially planned to protest an impending oil price hike, but because of violent attempts to disperse them, also later demanded that Marcos's military pledge not to assault the campus in the future. 41. After the martial law proclamation, Marcos's declaration of martial law in September 1972 saw the immediate shutdown of all media not approved by Marcos, including Quezon City media outlets such as GMA Channel 7 and ABS-CBN Channel 2. At the same time, it saw the arrest of many students, journalists, academics, and politicians who were considered political threats to Marcos, many of them residents of Quezon City. By the morning after Marcos's televised announcement of the proclamation, about 400 of these arrestees were gathered in Camp Crame on the southwestern reaches of Quezon City, destined to be among the first of thousands of political detainees under the Marcos dictatorship. 41. Camp Crame would be the site of many of the human rights abuses of the Marcos dictatorship, with one of the first being the murder of student journalist Liliosa Haleo in Camp Crane. 42. Among the prominent cases of abuse suffered specifically by Quezon City residents were the cases of Primitivo Mijares and his 16-year-old son Boyet Mijares, who lived in Project 6 at the time of their deaths. Wink with a frown. 43. Roman Catholic Diocese of Cubeo's social worker Purification Pedro, who was murdered by a soldier at her hospital room in Bataan. Wink with a frown. 44. 23-year-old Camias resident and student activist Roland Jan Quimpo, who became a desaparecido. Wink with a frown. 45, and Cubeo-based Taylor Rolando Lando Federis, who was abducted by armed men in Lucena City while accompanying a group of activists to Baikal, tortured, and then killed. 46. In addition, a large number of student activists who were caught, detained, tortured, sexually abused, killed, and disappeared by the regime had been studying in the various universities and colleges in Quezon City. 41. One of the key moments that led to the eventual demise of the Marcos dictatorship was the 1974 Sacred Heart Novitiate raid, in which a Catholic seminary in Novaliches was raided on the suspicion that communist leaders were hiding there. The arrest of Father Benigno Mayo, who was the head of the Jesuit order in the Philippines at the time, and Father Jose Blanco alongside 21 members of the youth group called Student Catholic Action, SCA, helped convince the formerly neutral Philippine middle class that Marcos's powers had grown too great. 47-48. As international pressure forced Marcos to start restoring civil rights, other key moments in Philippine history took place in Quezon City. Journalist Joe Burgos established the Quezon City-based We Forum newspaper in 1977, and in it published a story by Colonel Bonifacio Galigo in November 1982, which discredited many of the Marcos medals. 49. Media coverage of the September 1984 Welcome Rotunda protest dispersal showed how opposition figures including 80-year-old former Senator Lorenzo Tanada and 71-year-old Manila Times founder Chino Roces were waterhosed, despite their frailty, and how student leader Fidel Namenzo, later Chancellor of the University of the Philippines Diliman, was shot nearly to death. Most significantly, The August 1983 funeral of assassinated opposition leader of Ninoy Aquino began at the Aquino family household in Times Street, West Triangle, Quezon City, and continued to the funeral mass at Santo Domingo Church in Santa Mesa Heights before the final interment at the Manila Memorial Park, Sucat. The procession took from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. to finish as 2 million people joined the crowd. The experience galvanized many of the Philippines into resisting the dictatorship, with protests against Marcos snowballing until they happened nearly every week, and until Marcos was ousted by the People Power Revolution. 50. Physical and administrative changes during the Marcos administration. In terms of administrative changes during this period, the region of Metro Manila was created as an integrated unit with the enactment of Presidential Decree No. 824 on November 7, 1975. The region encompassed 4 cities and 13 adjoining towns as a separate regional unit of government. 51. A year later, on June 24, 1976. Manila was reinstated by President Marcos as the capital of the Philippines for its historical significance as the seat of government since the Spanish period. Presidential Decree No. 940 states that Manila has always been to the Filipino people and in the eyes of the world, the premier city of the Philippines being the center of trade, commerce, education, and culture. 17. Concurrent with the reinstatement of Manila as the capital, Ferdinand Marcos designated his wife, Imelda Marcos, as the first governor of Metro Manila, who started the construction of massive government edifices with architectural significance as she rebranded Manila as the City of Man. Beginning March 15, 2020, Quezon City was placed under community quarantine, which were introduced due to the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. The strictest quarantine was the enhanced community quarantine in 2020 and 2021, in response to the then ongoing pandemic in the city, which has infected more than 100,000 of the city's residents, with more than 1,200 deaths. The quarantine was later downgraded to the Alert Level System, ALS, in 2021 until the state of public health emergency was lifted by President Bongbong Marcos on July 21, 2023. 65. In the afternoon of June 15, 2025, 61-year-old civil servant Mauricio Mori Pulhin, the technical staff director of the House Ways and Means Committee, was attending his daughter's birthday party in a gated subdivision in Barangay Commonwealth when 2 motorcycle-riding assailants entered the venue and fatally shot him at close range. 66. Police officials noted that based on evidence, the shooting was carefully planned out by the assailants. 67. House Speaker Martin Romualdez issued a statement the next day denouncing the brutal act of violence in the strongest possible terms and called on the Philippine National Police, PNP, and the National Bureau of Investigation, NBI, to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. 68. Geography. Elevation map of Quezon City. The drop in elevation along the eastern border of the city follows the length of the West Valley Fault. The geography of Quezon City is characterized by undulating terrain. The city is within the catchment area of 5 river systems: Marikina, Pasig, San Juan, Talahin, and Makawayan, along with their creeks and tributaries with a total length of almost 200 kilometers, 120 miles. 69. The city has an area of 161.11 square kilometers, 62.20 square miles, according to the 1995 GIS graphical plot, making it the largest local government unit, LGU, in Metro Manila in terms of land area. 36. Since its creation in 1939, the city's boundary were revised 4 times. The final revision was made through Republic Act No. 1575, which placed the city's territory at 151.06 square kilometers, 58.32 square miles. 5. Meanwhile, the Philippine Statistics Authority placed the city's land area at 171.71 square kilometers, 66.30 square miles, based on data provided by the Land Management Bureau. According to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology and Geoscience Australia on their study Earthquake Impact and Risk Assessment on the Greater Metropolitan Manila Area, The total area of Quezon City is at 165.33 square kilometers, 64 square miles. 71. Quezon City is bounded by Rodriguez and San Jose del Monte to the north, Marikina and San Mateo to the east, Pasig to the southeast, Mandaluyong and San Juan to the south, Manila to the southwest, and Caloocan and Valenzuela to the west and northwest. The city lies on the Guadalupe Plateau, a relatively high plateau at the northeast of the metropolis, situated between the lowlands of Manila to the southwest and the Marikina River Valley to the east. The highest elevation in Quezon City is the northern tip of the La Mesa Watershed Reservation at 250 meters, 820 feet, above sea level. 72. The West Valley Fault traverses the eastern border of the city. Barangays and congressional districts. See also, Barangays of Quezon City and legislative districts of Quezon City. Left, Barangays of Quezon City. Right, the 6 legislative districts of Quezon City. Quezon City is politically subdivided into 142 barangays. These barangays are grouped into 6 congressional districts, with each district being represented by a congressman in the House of Representatives. Each congressional district has 6 city councilors. The number of barangays per district is: District I, 37, District 2, 5, District 3, 37, District 4, 38, District V, 14, and District 6, 11. Although District 2 has the fewest barangays, it is the biggest in land area, including the Novaliches Reservoir. District I, 2015 population, 409,962, 73, covers Barangays Alicia, Bagong Pagasa, Bahay Toro, Balangasa, Bungad, Damar, Damayan, Del Monte, Katapunan, Mariblo, Masambong, NS Amaranto, Jintong Salahis, Nayon Canlaran, Pongbundok, Pagabagase Nayan, Paltok, Paraiso, Philayam, Ramon Magsaysay, Salvation, San Antonio, San Isidro Labrador, San Jose, Santa Cruz, Santa Teresita, Santo Cristo, Talayan, Veterans Village, and West Triangle. It has an area of 19.59 square kilometers, 7.56 square miles. 74. District 2, 2015 population, 688,773, 73, covers barangays Bagong Silangan, Batasan Hills, Commonwealth, Holy Spirit, and Patas. It is the most populous district in the country from 1987 to 2013, before it was partitioned and its northern part became the 5th district and its western part became the 6th district. District 3, 2015 population, 324,669, 73, covers barangays Amihan, Bagumbahay, Bagumbayan, Bayanahan, Blue Ridge A, Blue Ridge B, Camp Aguinaldo, Claro, Diaquino Zobel, Diandian, E, Rodriguez, East Camillas, Escopa I, Escopa II, Escopa III, Escopa IV, Libis, Loyola Heights, Manga, Marialag, Masagana, Matandang Bolera, Milagrosa, Pansol, Carina 2A, Carina 2B, Carina 2C, Carina 3A, St. Ignatius, San Roque, Silangan, Socorro, Tagumpay, Ugam Norte, Villa Maria Clara, West Camillas, and White Plains. Cubao, located at the southern part of the city, Cubao is the home of the 35-hectare, 86-acre Araneta City, a mixed-use township development that contains prominent shopping malls such as Ali Mall, Farmers Plaza, and Gateway Mall, and iconic landmarks such as the smart Araneta Coliseum. The Cubao Cathedral is the seat of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Cubao. Diliman. Diliman is located at the center of Quezon City, the place where the city was originally established. The area is named for the Tagalog word for the medicinal fern species Stenoclina palustris, 8384. Numerous national government offices are located in Diliman, as well as prominent colleges and universities, such as the University of the Philippines Diliman, FU, Fern College, and New Era University. The Diliman Quadrangle, which is bounded by the north, west, South, Timog, and East Avenues, is known for its hospitals, government edifices, and nightlife bars. Citation needed. Several streets in South Triangle and Barrambi Lajing Handa were named in honor of the 22 Boy Scouts who died in a plane crash en route to joining the 11th World Scout Jamboree. A memorial stands in the center of the roundabout at the intersection of Timog Avenue and Tomas Morato Avenue. The place was thus known as the Scout Area. Major commercial broadcasting media and television networks, such as ABS-CBN and GMA, have their headquarters within the Diliman Quadrangle. PTV, RPN, IBC, and PBS also hold headquarters in Diliman. La Loma. La Loma is located the southwestern portion of the city. It has 5 baranggays along the vicinity of its main streets, Ines Amaranto Avenue, Retiro, and A. Bonifacio Avenue. The district is famed as the birthplace of many popular Filipino culinary figures and establishments, especially devoted to the lechon. The nearby La Loma Cemetery is named after this place. New Manila. New Manila is named after the city of Manila, since most of its residents are affluent families from the city who wish to escape the stress of living in the capital. It was formerly a part of San Juan before being carved out from its mother town to form. The Quezon Memorial Shrine, which was built from 1952 to 1978, was designed in the Art Deco style. It became the city's symbol, and at its base was a museum and mausoleum dedicated to the late Manuel L. Quezon and his wife Aurora. When the city became the capital in 1948, a lot of government buildings transferred from Manila to Quezon City. Numerous government buildings were built during the terms of President Elpidio Carina, Ramon Magsaysay, Carlos P. Garcia, Diosdado Macapagal, and Ferdinand Marcos. However, it was only during the term of Marcos that began the Filipinization of architecture. Numerous government hospitals in the city, such as the Lung Center of the Philippines, Philippine Heart Center, and the Kidney Center of the Philippines, were built and regarded as designer hospitals. 93. Traditional Filipino design motifs were incorporated in government buildings, such as the Batasang Pambansa, which drew inspiration from the Bahay Kubo and the Bahay Nabato. 94. Most of the government buildings and structures built during the time of Marcos were associated with the edifice complex of the Marcoses. During his fourth SONA on July 28, 2025, President Bongbong Marcos vowed to expose and prosecute corruption in flood control projects. He ordered the release of a complete list of flood control projects from the past 3 years for public scrutiny. 53. The executive branch considered issuing an executive order creating an independent commission to investigate flood control project anomalies, with a draft submitted for Marcos's signature on September 8, 2025. 64. 65. The commission will work in parallel with existing probes launched by Congress. 66. And is poised to include members from diverse backgrounds, such as forensic accountancy and the judiciary. 67. On September 8, 2025, Marcos announced that the government will not include new funding for flood control projects in the 2026 national budget. This decision follows congressional investigations that have implicated numerous lawmakers, including his cousin, Speaker Martin Romualdez, Senators Jinggoy Estrada and Joel Villanueva, in alleged kickbacks from public works contracts. 68. The following day, he also announced the redirection of 225 billion Cuban pesos, $4.57 billion, initially designated for locally funded flood control projects in the 2026 budget, to education, health, and other urgent priorities. He stated that the 350 billion Cuban pesos, $7.11 billion, flood control budget for 2025 was delayed due to ongoing investigations, rendering the 2026 allocation redundant. Approximately 50 billion Cuban pesos, $1.02 billion, in foreign-assisted flood projects will proceed. The realignment of funds is intended to optimize savings and meet pressing social requirements. 69. On September 26, 2025, Marcos announced the reallocation of nearly 36 billion Cuban pesos, $730.96 million, from flood control projects in the proposed 2026 national budget to support social programs under the Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD. He emphasized the strengthening of the Pantuwid Pamilayang Pilipino Program, lit. Bridging Program for the Filipino Family, 4PS, to assist more families in improving their livelihoods, 70. During an aid distribution event at Gonzaga, Cagayan on September 27, 2025, Marcos announced that only flood control projects meeting all requirements will be approved, underscoring his dedication to reducing irregularities in infrastructure project implementation. He stated that these projects will only move forward with properly prepared proposals and local government clearance. He assured the public of the ongoing funding of compliant flood control initiatives, with over 300 billion Cuban pesos, $6.09 billion, allocated until next year, 71. Establishment of the Independent Commission for Infrastructure. Main article, Independent Commission for Infrastructure. On September 11, 2025, Marcos established the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, ICI, through Executive Order No. 94. This three-member body will investigate irregularities in flood control projects and all national government infrastructure works throughout the years. Malacaning stated that members of the ad hoc fact-finding commission are to be persons of proven competence, integrity, probity, and independence. Marcos named former Supreme Court Associate Justice Andres Reyes Jr. as its chairperson, former DPWH Secretary Rogelio Singson and CICIP Gores Vallejo and Company, SGV, country managing partner and fraud examiner Rosana A. Fajardo as commission members, with Baguio Mayor Benjamin Magalong as a special advisor, 72, 73. The commission will also be supported by a secretariat providing technical and administrative assistance, 74, 75. On September 26, 2025, Benjamin Magalong resigned as the special advisor and investigator due to a possible conflict of interest, 76, 77. Magalong clarified that there was no conflict of interest in his position, 78. On September 30, President Marcos appointed former Philippine National Police Chief Rodolfo Azurin Jr. as both special advisor and investigator for the ICI, replacing Magalong, 79. Rogelio Singson's resignation from the commission was announced on December 3, 2025, 80. On December 17, 2025, Bagon Aliansang Makabayan, Bayan, said that the Independent Commission for Infrastructure has excluded the president in its probe, noting how the commission has failed to charge the Marcos government for its pork barrel funds, budget insertions, and alleged kickbacks. 81. Bureau of Immigration. On September 4, 2025, the Bureau of Immigration, BI, announced that a contractor linked to anomalous flood control projects had departed the Philippines. The ICE spokesperson Dana Sandoval did not disclose the contractor's name, their firm, the departure date, or their destination. Sandoval said that the contractor is one of the 15 contractors mentioned by President Marcos. During an interview on DZMM, she said that the BI had begun verifying and monitoring whether the contractor will return to the Philippines, assuring that all information will be sent to the DOJ. She also stated that BI currently had no information regarding the reason for the travel. 82. Department of Budget and Management. In August 2025, the Department of Budget and Management, DBM, announced a 71.7 billion Cuban pesos, $1.46 billion, reduction in flood control infrastructure allocations for next year's National Expenditure Program, NEP. DBM Secretary Amna Pangandaman announced a 274.9 billion Cuban pesos, $5.58 billion, allocation for flood-related projects in the NEP for 2026, lower than this year's 346.6 billion Cuban pesos, $7.04 billion. However, the NEP lacks appropriation for the controversial Ida para sa Kapos ang Kita program, Translate Aid for Low-Income Program, AKP, a form of pork barrel. The NEP also reduced confidential funds by 11%. 83. Department of Finance. In September 2025, Finance Secretary Ralph Recto said that anomalous ghost flood control projects are estimated to have cost the Philippine economy as much as 118 billion Cuban pesos, $2.4 billion between 2023 and 2025. During the Senate panel on finances meeting on the second day, with the Development Budget Coordination Committee, DBCC, concerning the NEP for the upcoming year, he expressed his agency's condemnation of reported anomalous flood control projects, emphasizing the seriousness of revenue generation. 84. At the same time, the Department of Finance (DOF) will implement a more stringent approval process for flood control projects. These projects will now be consolidated within a single river basin, ensuring their aggregate value is sufficient to warrant high-level scrutiny. According to Recto, the Economy and Development Council Investment Coordination Committee, Cabinet Committee, ICCC, sanctioned a more rigorous measure intended to mitigate corruption within specific projects. The resolution mandates a thorough government review of flood management projects to ensure they are prepared for immediate implementation. The current ICC guidelines mandate evaluation only for projects exceeding a 2.5 billion Cuban pesos, $50.76 million threshold. Consequently, the majority of existing flood control projects, which were assessed on an individual basis, had costs below this threshold and therefore did not undergo the ICC evaluation process. 85. Department of Justice. On September 3 and 4, 2025, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Romulo signed 2 Immigration Lookout Bulletin Orders, ILBO, against 43 people implicated in the anomalous flood control projects, based on the list of names submitted by Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Chairperson Rodante Marcolita and DPWH Secretary Vince Dizon, respectively, 86, 87. On September 26, 2025, the Department of Justice, DOJ, announced that 21 individuals, including incumbent legislators, had been recommended for case build-up and possible prosecution over alleged anomalies in flood control projects. The recommendation was based on affidavits submitted by former Department of Public Works and Highways officials and endorsed by the National Bureau of Investigation, NBI. 88. Those identified by the DOJ included Representative Poe, Senators Escudero, Villanueva, and Jinggoy, former Senator Revilla, Undersecretaries, and former Representative Cajayanoy, Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo, former DPWH District Engineer Henry Alcantara, Special Envoy Maynard Ngo, Carlene Villa, John Carlo Rivera, Linda, Victoria, Maconis, Juanito Mendoza, CPA, Sally Nicholas Santos, Jesse Mejuse, Engineers Bryce Erickson Hernandez, JP Mendoza, and RJ Domasig, and individuals identified only by the aliases Bum Ramos, Mina, and Andre Balabat. On September 2, he announced the abolishment of the DPWH Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Committee, which was formed by Bonoan, saying that the department should not investigate itself. 94. On September 3, Dizon asked the Department of Justice to issue an Immigration Lookout Bulletin against over 20 DPWH officials and contractors involved in the ongoing investigation. 95. On September 4, Dizon fired DPWH Region 4A Assistant Regional Director, OIC, Henry Alcantara and Bulacan 1st District Engineers Bryce Erickson Hernandez and JP Mendoza over anomalous flood control projects in the province, and he recommended filing cases against them. 96. On September 5, Dizon urged Wawa Builders General Manager Mark Allen Arevalo to surrender following accusations that his company was involved in fraudulent, ghost, flood control projects across the country. He commented on whether Arevalo could be a dummy after Arevalo testified before the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee's probe into flood control project anomalies on September 1, 97. On September 9, Dizon mandated the immediate halt of all flood control projects in Oriental Mindoro due to significant irregularities found in a 3 billion Cuban pesos, $60.91 million flood control project in Barangay Tagumpay, Najan. He identified several interconnected issues in the 1.5 kilometer, 0.93 miles flood control project, notably a significant discrepancy between the master plan's requirement of 12 meters, 39 feet, sheet piles and the installed less than 3 meters, 9.8 feet, sheet piles, 98. On September 11, Dizon stated that the complaint, which falls under Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, also known as Republic Act, RA, number 3019, will be filed against 18 individuals and companies allegedly involved in flood control anomalies, highlighting that these cases are non-bailable. Among them are Alcantara, Hernandez, Curley and Sarah Discaya, 99, 100. He also suspended the wearing of service uniforms by DPWH personnel to prevent them from being harassed amid the controversy. 101. On September 16, Dizon found several flood control projects in Bawan, La Union to be super substandard during an inspection. He observed the use of inferior materials and noted that one project, purportedly completed in March, was still under construction. The inspection covered 9 projects, including flood mitigation structures along the Bawang River Basin. 102. On September 17, the DPWH reduced its proposed 2026 NEP budget by 252 billion Cuban pesos, $5.12 billion, removing funding for locally funded flood control projects. The agency's revised budget is 625.8 billion Cuban pesos, $12.71 billion, down from 881 billion Cuban pesos, $17.89 billion, though 15.77 billion Cuban pesos, $320.2 million, for foreign-assisted flood control projects was retained. Dizon stated the department addressed concerns such as funding completed and duplicate projects. Additionally, 3 billion Cuban pesos, $60.91 million, allocated for duplicate or completed projects, including overlapping road sections and installations, was also trimmed. 103. Department of Migrant Workers. On September 12, 2025, the Department of Migrant Workers, DMW, Secretary Hans Kakdak, announced that the DMW is recalling labor attaché Macy Monique Maglank, who was stationed in Los Angeles, to undergo an investigation after she was mentioned in an ongoing Senate investigation. He also stated that no penalties have been imposed yet, but Maglank is expected to respond to inquiries from the DMW and other necessary investigative bodies. 104. Anti-Money Laundering Council and the Banco Central ng Pilipinas. On September 16, 2025, the Anti-Money Laundering Council, AMLC, secured court approval to freeze the bank accounts of individuals accused of corruption in government flood control projects, intending to halt the movement of stolen public funds and enable recovery. Concurrently, the Banco Central ng Pilipinas, BSP Lit. Central Bank of the Philippines, is leveraging a new law to probe financial accounts suspected of being used to misappropriate taxpayer funds allocated for flood mitigation. According to AMLC Executive Director Matthew David, he stated that the freeze order specifically targets 135 bank accounts and 27 insurance policies. 105. On October 2025, the AMLC is reportedly monitoring at least 5 billion Cuban pesos, $101.52 million, worth of assets linked to an alleged flood control corruption scheme, according to the ICI. The amount is expected to increase as the probe continues. The 5 billion Cuban pesos, $101.52 million figure, spread across over 2,800 bank and financial accounts, is a moving target as investigators continue to trace and freeze additional assets. As of now, 4.67 billion Cuban pesos, $94.82 million, in assets have been frozen. 106. Local government. On August 22, 2025, the League of Cities of the Philippines, LCP, led by San Juan Mayor Francis Zamora, expressed support for President Marcos's push for transparency and accountability in flood control projects, some of which were exposed as either ghost, or poorly constructed by monopolizing contractors. 107. On August 28, 2025, Quezon City Mayor Joy Belmonte announced that over 70 mayors have signed the Mayors for Good Governance amid the flood control controversy. 22. On August 29, 2025, a lawyer from one of the contracting firms implicated in Marcos's anomalous flood control projects approached the Department of Justice about the possibility of being a whistleblower. 9. On the same day, Matagobi Mayor Bernardino Tacoi requested the Deep WH in Ormoc to stop the repairs of an ongoing flood control project that collapsed before completion. Tacoi wrote to Deep WH District Engineer Peter Secco, stating that he will not allow the project's continuation without first investigating it, worth 96 million Cuban pesos, $1.95 million, in a barangay in Matagobi. He claimed that 25 to 30 meters, 82 to 98 feet, of the structure collapsed and substandard materials may have been used in the project. 108. On September 11, 2025, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno said that the Manila city government had collected over 93 million Cuban pesos, $1.89 million, from contractors for flood control projects, with 140 out of 315 issued statements of account, SOA, settled. The remaining 175 SOAs are still unpaid, totaling 127.28 million Cuban pesos, $2.58 million. He stated that collected funds will be redirected to essential city expenditures, focusing on social services for Manila residents. He warned that contractors failing to meet obligations will be blacklisted and barred from future city projects, with their names also being submitted to Deep WH Secretary Dizon for potential exclusion from national projects. On July 25, 2025, Senator Panfilo Lacson claimed in a public statement that as much as half of the 2 trillion Cuban pesos, $40.61 billion, allocated for flood control over 15 years may have been lost to corruption, with only 40% of project funds translating into actual construction. In his privileged speech titled Flooded Gates of Corruption on August 20, 2025, Lacson cited Bulacan as a hotspot for anomalous projects and linked irregularities to congressional insertions. 115. On September 9, 2025, after Lacson became the newly elected Senate President pro tempore, he stated that the Blue Ribbon Committee's investigation into substandard and ghost flood control projects will not conflict with Malacanang's plan for an independent commission. He clarified that the Senate inquiry is in aid of legislation, whereas the Palace Commission will focus on building cases for prosecution. 116. He also linked Bonoan to a contractor involved in flood control projects in Bulacan, alleging Bonoan had business dealings with Candaba, Pampanga Mayor Rene Maglink. 117. In September 2025, Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Chairman Rodante Marcolita stated that a total of 60 flood control projects are reportedly being investigated as potential ghost projects. He stated during a hearing that the figures he presented were derived from data provided by President Marcos, which had been verified in prior hearings. 118, 119. On September 1, 2025, at the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee's motu proprio inquiry, Senate Deputy Majority Leader J.V. Ejercito strongly criticized Deep WH Region 4 Assistant Regional Director, OIC, Henry Alcantara, who is a former Deep WH Bulacan 1st Engineering District Engineer. 120. The criticism stemmed from Alcantara's alleged negligence in the approval of flood control projects that are suspected to be anomalous. Furthermore, Ejercito highlighted Alcantara's admission to engaging in frequent casino visits during his tenure in government service. Alcantara acknowledged his failure to exercise proper due diligence in the signing of documents pertaining to ghost projects. 121. On September 8, 2025, the Senate cited former Bulacan District Engineer Bryce Hernandez in contempt for allegedly lying before the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee regarding his casino visits. 122. On September 18, the Senate also cited Henry Alcantara in contempt for repeatedly denying knowledge of ghost flood control projects in Bulacan. It also cited Curly Discaya in contempt for giving inconsistent statements as to the absence of his wife in the Senate hearing 123. On September 23, 2025, Romulla stated that the National Bureau of Investigation, NBI, had recommended filing charges against Senators Villanueva and Estrada, Representative Saldi Co., AKO Baikal, former Deep WH Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo, former Representative Mitch Kajayanoy, Kalukan II, and Henry Alcantara for indirect bribery and malversation of public funds. He indicated that the NBI and the AMLC were involved in the investigation, particularly concerning the affidavit of Henry Alcantara, who was taken to the DOJ to review his statements and discuss potential witness protection. For Villanueva, Alcantara alleged that in 2022 the senator requested multipurpose buildings amounting to 1.5 billion Cuban pesos, $30.46 million, 1.5 billion Cuban pesos, though only 600 million Cuban pesos, $12.18 million, was initially available. Alcantara testified that Bernardo instructed him to provide Villanueva with projects equivalent to 150 million Cuban pesos, $3.05 million, which Alcantara said he later delivered in cash through one of Villanueva's staff members at a rest house in Bocó, Bulacan, 125. In the same affidavit, Alcantara admitted that he had delivered alleged kickbacks for Representative Co to his house in Pasig and to a parking lot in Taguig, 126. Alcantara had previously denied knowledge of the alleged corruption scheme involving DPWH flood control projects. His latest testimony aligned with claims made by his subordinate, Bryce Hernandez, about kickbacks directed to Senators Joel Villanueva and Jingoy Estrada and former Senator Bon Revilla, 126. He stated that the funds originated from advances made by contractors, and that he was in charge of distributing Co's portion to intermediaries referred to as alias Paul and alias Mark. Alcantara asserted that on one or two occasions, the payments were delivered to the parking lot of Shangri-La at the fort, the Nilla in Bonifacio Global City, Taguig. Alternately, he brought them to Co's residence in Valle Verde 6, Pasig City, 126. Alcantara claimed that Co's demanded share from project budgets rose from 20% in 2022 to 25% in 2023 through 2025. He recalled meeting Co sometime between August and September 2021 at a hotel in Taguig, during which they discussed managing projects in the 1st District of Bulacan. From 2022 to 2025, Co reportedly advocated for 426 projects in that district, valued in total at 35.02 billion Cuban pesos, $711.07 million. According to Alcantara, the kickbacks were given in stages, an initial 10% once a project was entered into the NEP, and the remaining 10 to 15% after inclusion in the General Appropriations Act, GA. 126. Concurrently, Co had denied recent allegations made against him during a Senate Blue Ribbon Committee investigation into questionable infrastructure projects. He described the claims as false and did not specify the details of the allegations, which involved accusations from Alcantara and Hernandez regarding budget insertions and kickbacks. Co emphasized his intention to respond to these claims at an appropriate time and venue, 127. On September 25, 2025, former Deep WH Bernardo testified about the involvement of Senator Francis Escudero and former Senators Revilla and Nancy Binay, who is now the mayor of Makati, with anomalous flood control projects. He also accused Representative Co and mentioned COA Commissioner Mario G. Lipena, along with implicated Deep WH officials Alcantara and Hernandez. Bernardo stated that his allegations were based on personal knowledge and direct interactions with the involved parties. He acknowledged his association with businessman Maynard Ngo, who is currently the special envoy to China and a known campaign donor of Escudero, who requested a list of projects for the GA. They concurred on a 20% cut for the projects, 128. Simultaneously, Senator Marcolita presented Orly Regala Gatiza, a former soldier of the Philippine Marines who previously worked as a security aide to Representative Poe, testified before the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee that he regularly delivered luggage filled with cash to former House Speaker Romualdez's residence while working for Representative Company. He served as a security consultant for Poe from December 5, 2024 to August 5, 2025, indicated that similar cash deliveries were made to Poe's residence during his tenure as well. Cotiza reported that he delivered money to Poe's residence at Valle Verde 6, Pasig City, confirmed by sources. He referred to the cash as basura lit. Trash, with each luggage allegedly containing 48 million Cuban pesos, $974,619 and 29 cents, to 50 million Cuban pesos, $1.02 million, and notes indicating the amounts. Cotiza identified Poe's executive assistants, John Paul Estrada and Mark Texe, as responsible for receiving and managing the funds. 129. A lawyer, Pechi Roces, denied any involvement in notarizing or preparing an affidavit presented in the Senate by Cotiza. In a letter, Espera stated that the signature and notarial details attributed to her are falsified and unauthorized, demanding the removal of a social media post showing the affidavit, which she deemed it as spurious, fraudulent, and damaging to her reputation as a lawyer and notary public. 130. Escudero denied accusations tying him to flood control project anomalies, labeling them as part of a well-orchestrated plan to undermine the Senate. He stated that the allegations were intended to distract from the real culprits. He denied the allegations made by Bernardo, asserting that Bernardo had never directly contacted him about the matter. He questioned why other prominent individuals were not being held accountable and vowed to contest any charges based on Bernardo's statements. 131. Makati Mayor Binay also denied accusations made by Bernardo regarding her involvement in anomalies within the DPWH. Binay expressed shock at being implicated, asserting that the claims are false and that she's been focused on her mayoral duties. Bernardo previously alleged that Binay's associate, Carlene Villa, solicited a 15% kickback from flood control projects worth 250 million Cuban pesos, $5.08 million, stating that he delivered 37 million Cuban pesos, $751,269 and 4 cents, to Binay in Quezon City. 131. 132. Former House Speaker and Representative Romualdez, Leyte First, has rejected allegations regarding receiving money from infrastructure projects, which were supposedly delivered to his home. He clarified that his residence cited in these claims has been under renovation since January 2024. Romualdez criticized the testimony of a witness, Cotiza, which was linked to Marcolita, asserting it is fabricated and aims to erroneously connect him to a kickback scheme. A significant flaw in Cotiza's testimony is the assertion that deliveries were made to Romualdez's home in December 2024, a claim he deemed impossible due to the ongoing renovations. Romualdez emphasized the absurdity of the allegation, reinforcing that the renovation left the property unoccupied except for construction workers. He cites the principle falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus, asserting that if one aspect of the testimony is false, the entire account is unreliable. 133. Representative Eric Yap Benguet also denied allegations of delivering money to Representative Company. He stated that he never participated in such activities, calling the claims untrue and expressing disappointment at being implicated in alleged irregularities that affected his integrity and commitment to serving his constituents. 134. Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin denied allegations from former DPWH Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo regarding a claimed 15% agreed commitment intended for the office of the Executive Secretary, OES. He asserted that the claims made in Bernardo's sworn affidavit were untrue and emphasized that the OES is not involved in the DPWH budget allocation processes. 135. On November 18, 2025. Malacanang announced the resignation of Bersamin and Budget Secretary Amna Pangandaman to allow for the two to be subject to further investigation. 136. DepEd Undersecretary Trigov Olivar denied involvement in alleged irregularities, where he was accused of receiving a cut. He welcomed any investigation and stated he would take a voluntary leave of absence to cooperate fully with the inquiry. 137. At a Senate hearing, Senator Ejercito highlighted the unfunded items under the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority's MMDA billion budget proposal for 2026. The DBM recommended only 5.88 billion Cuban pesos, $119.47 million, a 56.66% reduction from the total proposal of 13.58 billion Cuban pesos, $275.65 million. Some unfunded projects include a 300 million Cuban pesos, $6.09 million, rehabilitation improvement along the Mangahan floodwater channel and another along the lower Marikina River. 138. House of Representatives. Representative Mark Anthony Santos, Los Piñas, also disclosed that 42 deep WH projects in his city, including flood control and drainage works, were also implemented without permits. He also urged the sacking of the DPWH district engineer. 139. Representative Isidro Ungab, Davao City, 3RD, stated that Official Development Assistance (ODA) funds have been removed from the NEP for both 2024 and 2025. He disclosed that 40.2 billion Cuban pesos, $816.24 million billion of the 49.1 billion Cuban pesos, $996.95 million billion allocated for flood control projects in 2024 to 2025 through ODA funds had been diverted from its intended purpose. He also stated that the allocations for the next 2 years will fund 11 large-scale, high-impact ODA projects, with 21.6 billion Cuban pesos, $438.58 million, allocated for 2024 and 27.5 billion Cuban pesos, $558.38 million for 2025, totaling 49.1 billion Cuban pesos, $996.95 million. On August 31, 2025, Representative Marcelino Teodoro, Marikina, 1SD, announced that the 2026 NEP that was submitted by DBM had allocated funding for completed flood control projects and road repairs. Teodoro confirmed House Deputy Speaker Ronaldo Puno's, Antipolo, 1SD, disclosure that several items in the NEP included budget allocations for completed projects. 143. On the same day, Representative Leandro Laviste, Batangas, 1SD, emphasized the need for a technical audit of the DPWH flood control projects in his district. He collaborated with affected local government units and hired engineers and consultants at his own expense. He led inspections in Balayan, Batangas, after the arrest of the district engineer who had attempted to bribe him. He found that sheet piles in flood control projects along the Binambing River were shorter than required, measuring 3.9 to 5.5 meters, 13 to 18 feet, instead of the required 15 meters, 49 feet. The Deep WH replaced the shorter piles at the contractor's expense, but Laviste has yet to receive an explanation from the DPWH. 144. Given concerns on erroneous inclusions in the 2026 NEP, including allegations that completed flood control projects were slated to receive funding, the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriations deferred briefings on the Deep WH budget during its hearing on September 5, 2025. The committee asked Deep WH and DBM to submit a list of errata for their respective budgets by September 12. Deep WH Secretary Dizon confirmed that they will adhere to the given deadlines, stressing that the agency will prioritize fixing errors, but that a full refresh of the agency budget may require internal discussions extending beyond the deadline. Dizon also stated that he is open to reducing the DPWH's proposed 2026 budget of 881 billion Cuban pesos, $17.89 billion if needed.